Hi, everybody. Thanks for being here on a Saturday morning. Happy to see you all. I'm going to share my presentation, but I encourage you to please use the chat throughout the whole time I'm talking. I want this to be like engaging and helpful to the folks who are able to be here today. If y'all could start by putting in the chat what brings you here, do you have kids? Are you looking to get kids, have kids soon? What's your family planning timeline look like? Love to get a sense of where we're starting from as I start to talk. My name is River Nice. My pronouns are they, them. I'll tell you a little bit about me, and then I'll tell you the plan for today. But like I said, go ahead and put in the chat what your family planning timeline looks like or what else brings you to this workshop today. Awesome. So my name is River. My pronouns are they, them. I am a financial planner. Started my own firm a couple of years ago to specifically serve trans and queer folks. What is a financial planner? People use the words financial advisor and financial planner to mean several different jobs and use them kind of interchangeably as well. So for me personally, when I say I'm a financial planner, I mean that clients pay me to teach them about money, to give them advice about what to do with their money, and to make sure that they actually have a plan for how they're going to use money and financial products as tools to get what they want out of life. Some other folks might use financial advisor to mean I sell life insurance or I manage investments for people. So I just wanted to give you a heads up about my focus here. Oh, that's a little out of date. I launched Be Intentional Financial in 2019. But I'll give you a little bit of my personal finance philosophy so you know where I'm coming from as I talk today. The more years I spend in this profession, the more clear it is that capitalism is oppressive and is actively harming us all the time. I also see so much shame around money, and I want to try to lessen some of that shame, especially for our community. I do try to avoid rule of thumb numbers. People are always like, oh, River, what percentage of my income should go to rent? Or how many months of expenses should I have in emergency savings? I don't find rules of thumb like that to be as helpful as getting specific to your situation and your needs. And then I did name my company Be Intentional Financial because my number one financial advice is to be intentional with it. Don't just avoid it. Don't just hope things work out, but try to have some intention to figure out what you want and make a plan to get it, and then stick to that plan as best you can. My plan for today is to talk a little bit about how much things might cost in like broad ranges so that if you don't have that information, you can start to get some ballpark numbers in your head. Then we'll talk about some ways to reduce those costs because everything in this country is more negotiable than you might think. We'll talk about how to save up for your goal. So definitely budgeting. Saw some people talking about budgeting in the chat. That is my bread and butter. And then I also want to go over some important financial considerations once you have kids of thinking about what important documents you need and what to do with money to save for the future. I hope I said this, but please use the chat throughout. Please ask questions, add comments, add suggestions for other folks. I want this to be interactive and helpful for the group here. And I know that I'm not the only person in this Zoom room with wisdom and knowledge. So please share your wisdom and share your questions. So to get a sense of how much things cost, these are the numbers that I see. Adopting from foster care can be from $0 to $2,600. And this is not just fostering kids. This is adopting from foster care for kids who don't have a family of origin to be reunited with. Domestic adoption can be from $20,000 to $40,000. International adoption can be a little more expensive than that. A DIY pregnancy with anonymous donor sperm can cost from $300 to $1,500 per sperm vial. And then it, depends on how lucky you get the first time you try. DIY pregnancy with known sperm, where you know the person who's giving you the sperm, can be as cheap as $25 or up to $300 or even $0, but definitely on the cheaper end of things. Intrauterine insemination is a more medically involved pregnancy, but not as involved as IVF. So that can be ranging from somewhere around like $250 to like $4,000. IVF, where the person who is carrying the pregnancy also is the one to use their eggs, can range from like $13,000 to $21,000. And then reciprocal IVF, where the person who's using the person whose egg we're using and the person whose uterus we're using are two different people, can be a little more expensive than that because we have two bodies to take care of medically. Now, a gestational carrier where we have an egg donor and then again a different uterus, but in this case, the uterus is a carrier, not one of the parents. DIY pregnancy, what are they buying? Yeah, Sheila, could be, comfort things, tool things. They're not necessarily buying the sperm, but they're buying things to make sure that the sperm ends up where it needs to go comfortably. So a gestational carrier can be really expensive. Surrogacy, where the person is providing, the surrogate is providing both the egg and the uterus, is highly variable. I couldn't even come up with a range there. It could be anywhere, depends on the person who is the surrogate. And then I do want to point out that establishing legal parentage is often going to be part of the costs for us. And that can range anywhere from like $100 to $3,000, depending on whether you can get a lawyer to help you out pro bono, depending on what forms you actually need, how many forms you actually need. But you want to make sure that legally your child is yours, and nobody can dispute that. Now, for those of us who might want to freeze our eggs because we're going on testosterone or have medical concerns, that can cost anywhere from $7,000 to $12,000 upfront, depending on whether you can get health insurance to cover anything. And then you also have to pay storage fees every year that the eggs are being frozen somewhere. Sperm freezing is cheaper, less medically invasive, but then again, you have to pay for storage fees. So sperm freezing, again, for folks who are starting hormone replacement therapy or have medical concerns, those are costs that can come into play. Next, I want to talk a little bit about some ways to reduce costs. There are grants out there. I see not a lot of folks realize that there is money that you can apply to get. I am happy to share this presentation and these links with y'all. So Family Equality is a website that has family building grants, adoption grants, fertility preservation grants, fertility medication grants and discount programs. And then there's also a couple services that or programs that can offer discounted services for active duty military and veterans. Helpusadopt.org also has grants specific to adoption. And both of these are not necessarily specific to the LGBTQ community, but both will show, we'll say this one's LGBT friendly. And most of them are at this point. Things get easier for us every year in this category. So it's worth applying if you've got the time and energy to do so. If you are looking for sperm, depending on where you are, you got to check laws about exchanging money for human tissue or whether we frame the cost as something else. But there's some databases here that might be helpful. There is a known donor registry, and then there is a database of sperm banks and fertility centers actually maintained by the FDA. So you can use those resources as well. Now, there's some ways that you can reduce if you are going through intrauterine inception or in vitro fertilization, that we can try to get the cost down. So you can look at different fertility centers or medical centers and see if some are less expensive than others. You can also try to reduce the cost of the medicine required to set up the egg and set up the uterus. I've seen folks ask pharmacies for discounts. I've seen folks ask multiple pharmacies to see if there's different costs at different places. I've seen folks just ask hospitals or fertility centers if they have lower cost options to acquire the medicine. I've seen folks get medicine for free from a fertility center because they were buddy-buddy with the nurse. So, make friends, ask around, see what you can get. There's also coupons for medicine out in the US, which, it's messed up that we have to do this, but we play the game as best we can. GoodRx often has coupons. You can look for manufacturer coupons once you know the specific medications you need. You can also look for consumer savings programs via pharmacies or medicine manufacturers. But, when you see a price for something, you don't have to take it at face value. You can try to find ways to reduce those costs. For IUI and IVF, obviously we are hoping for the best and hoping that the first time you try, you get pregnant. But if you can try to prepare your body to make the first round work, I was recommended the book, It Starts with the Egg by Rebecca Fett. So that might be a helpful resource. And then I've also once or twice seen folks who were able to actually donate their eggs in exchange for free or lower cost IVF treatment. So if that's something that you would be comfortable doing, you can look for fertility centers that would have a program like that available to you. I've also seen folks donate their eggs in exchange to get money for grad school. So like there's options out there. Any questions before I get into actually making a plan and budgeting and saving up? Okay. So first step to making a plan is figuring out your goal as specific as you can get. So think about what is your plan of how you want to build your family for like a plan A, and then maybe a plan B if the first one doesn't work out for you. And then figure out how much does it cost. So start with a ballpark number. You can use the ballpark ranges that I gave you at the beginning. And then you can start to ask around to get information about the specific adoption agency that you're looking for, or the fertility center near you, or, get cost estimates from a couple different places and start to get a sense of what your goal is going to be. Then you also want to figure out your resources. So what do you have available to you that could help with these costs and with this process? If you're going for pregnancy of some kind, will your health insurance help with anything at all? Do you need to prove something to them in order to get them to help? Do you have access to other health insurance plans you could switch to? Sometimes folks are offered multiple health insurance plans through work. So maybe the year that you're looking for pregnancy is the year that you choose the highest coverage health insurance plan, even if it's the most expensive. Does your partner have access to health insurance through their job? Can you get on their plan? Think about the different health insurance options that are available to you and which one might be the most helpful for the type of medical pregnancy that you're looking to achieve. Along those lines, does your health insurance provider or job offer a health savings account or a flex spending account? A health savings account is the more flexible of the two, because that money rolls over indefinitely. So if you have access to a high deductible health insurance plan through work, then you might also have access to a health savings account, and you can put money from your paycheck directly into that health savings account pre-tax. So you get to save a little money on income tax. So if you're in that situation and you want to have if you want to get pregnant in like 2 or 3 years from now, you could try to max out that health savings account for the next 3 years. And then you've got the money sitting in that account ready to help with those costs when you're ready. So saves you some money on income tax over the next couple of years. And then you've got money sitting in an account ready to be used for health-related expenses. A flex spending account is not quite as flexible. Only a certain amount of money will roll over to the next year. But again, can save you some money on income taxes because the money goes into the account pre-tax. So depending on what's available to you, it could be a helpful resource. Also consider, when thinking about how much research you're going to do, how many grants you're going to apply for, how much negotiating you're going to do on the phone, think about how much time and energy you and or partners actually have. I know some folks who are like, you know what, I work part-time or I work full-time, but it's, not too mentally taxing at my job. I've got free time, nights and weekends. I am down to put in as much effort as it takes to get the cost as low as possible. Awesome, do that. I know some other folks who are like, well, I'm self-employed and I am working my butt off all the time to make as much money as possible. So it might actually be a more effective use of your time and money resources to make more money instead of getting costs down. Depends on your circumstances and depends on your capacity. But something to think about, it's not just about getting costs down as low as possible. It might be about getting income up or finding that trade-off between how much time and energy I have and what I can get. Also consider, do you have any possibility of financial support from loved ones? Some of us do, some of us don't, but I have seen folks get some help from the grandparents to be, because they have some investment in wanting to see those grandkids. So maybe there's some help that can happen there. And then of course, how much are you actually able to save up? And so that's what we're going to talk about next. So how does one create a budget? You figure out your expenses, you figure out your income, you match them up. When thinking about your expenses, think about your goals, think about emergency savings. Also think about like weird stuff or like less than frequent, like less than monthly in terms of frequency stuff. I see people get tripped up a lot when they're like, okay, these are all the bills that happen each month, but they forget that they have to pay car insurance every 6 months or something like that. Figure out your income, match your income to expenses. That's the basic philosophy of a budget. Here we go. Remember to plan for the weird stuff. There are tools that are available to you. I'm a big fan of old-fashioned spreadsheets, and I have a spreadsheet template that I use with all my clients. I have a couple clients who really like YNAB, which stands for You Need a Budget. That one costs somewhere around like $90 a year or something, but if it is a good fit for your brain, then it might be worth it. I've also seen folks use Simplify by Quicken or Monarch Money. Ultimately, if you've never budgeted before, or if your budgeting system currently doesn't work for you, then you might just need to find something else. We all have different brain styles and learning styles. So like you might have to just find the tool that makes the most sense to your brain. So I said, figure out your expenses. You might be asking, how do I do that? Go back and look at them. Ideally, I would recommend looking at the past 3 months and looking at all of your bank account and credit card statements and looking at every single thing you spent money on, not in a guilty way, not in a shamey way, not in a, I wish I did something different, because you did the best you could with the information you had in that moment. But we can learn from this data about what you are prioritizing with your money and what your habits are. And then once you have that data, you can make an informed decision about what you want to do moving forward. Can also be helpful to get on the same page as partners. Again, not in a shamey way, but just in a like, okay, these are what my habits are. These are what your habits are. Maybe I want to change my habits this way and you want to change your habits this way. And that's going to let us save a little more. Remember to check where your money went in terms of like Venmo, Cash App, PayPal, actual cash. It can be hard to know, like if you see on the checking account statements, like money came out of an ATM, like, I don't know what happened to that cash. But for me, I try to make some informed guess. You know, if it was the ATM next to the barber shop, probably went to my haircut. If it's the ATM at Taboo, it probably went to tips for drag performers. So like, I can kind of make a guess of where the money might have gone. And like I said, once you've looked at everything in the past 3 months, or even just 1 month, if 3 months sounds overwhelming, right? Like just start with the month of October. But then think about what less frequent expenses didn't make it into that list. Do you have any annual subscriptions? Do you have any bills that happen less than monthly? And then what emergencies could come up? So I recommend having emergency savings set up before you start using your savings for other things, if and when you can, because we never know when life's going to throw something weird at us. And especially here in the US, we are at risk for things like unexpected medical debt and car expenses and pet expenses and things like that. So when you have a cushion of savings for emergency, that can help prevent you going into debt. Yeah, oof, 4 cars, I am so sorry. That's rough. But hey, you did have savings to get through it, it sounds like. So good for you for making that happen and good for you for surviving it. That's rough. So when I think about emergency savings, I know the whole internet is going to tell you to have like 6 months worth of expenses in your savings account. I don't think that's realistic anymore for most Americans because the wealth divide is getting worse and worse every year. And 6 months worth of expenses is a lot of money at this point, especially if you're like paying rent in Philly. So I would rather think about what are the risks that you worry about and that might be relevant to your life and how much money would be helpful to get through each of those. So if the car gets totaled, if the dog needs surgery, if I have a health scare of some kind and I have to pay the maximum that my health insurance will ask me to pay out of pocket this year. If someone I love is in the hospital across the country and I need to drop everything and get on a plane, like how much money would be helpful to have in those scenarios? And then think about, once you got like kind of thinking through what are those risks that I'm worried about, maybe take the 2 most expensive ones and add those together. And that's your goal. And then once you meet that goal, you can reevaluate, say, do I want more in my emergency savings, or am I now ready to be saving for other things besides just emergencies? Depends on how worried you are about these things. So as you're looking at all of your expenses, figure out how you want to categorize them. You get to choose, like the internet and all the budgeting apps are going to have their recommendations for grouping like household expenses and personal shopping and whatever. I'm much more interested in what data would you like to have about yourself? So I have some clients who will like group restaurants all into one category. And I have other clients who will separate like, okay, this category is for takeout because I'm tired. This category is for going out to eat socially, making sure I'm seeing my friends. And then this category is for dates with my partner. So then I can see, well, wow, I'm actually prioritizing takeout more than dates with my partner. And that's not actually my priority for myself. So I would love to shift and make sure that I'm spending more money on my partner and less money on takeout, or whatever it is. It's just about figuring out what you're prioritizing and is that accurate to what's important to you. So I always have some suggestions for how to save money. Number one would be, are you paying for things that you don't actually need or don't actually use? And going back to look at what you've spent over the last 1 to 3 months is a really great way to catch those subscriptions you didn't realize you were still paying for. Also, notice if you are paying for a more expensive option for something when a cheaper option would be fine. Also, notice when you're paying for things because you have some kind of weird peer pressure to do so, but you don't actually care about that thing. Folks get caught up in consumerism because it is brainwashing us all the time. And it's really easy to get caught up in that. And it is natural for humans to do whatever we think the other people around us are doing. But you can reality check a little bit and be like, is this actually important to me or not? You can also try to negotiate lower bills or switch providers to get costs down temporarily or permanently. Big one in Philly is if you can pit Comcast and Verizon against each other for internet, you might be able to get costs down a little bit. In my experience, Verizon's a little bit more willing to give and Comcast is not, but it might depend on the neighborhood that you live in. You can do the same thing with your cell phone provider. Please, if you're paying Verizon like $250 a month for your cell phone bill, please look into something else. It doesn't need to be that expensive. And then also if there's some promotion of like, switch to T-Mobile and get a discount for the first year, like that might be worth it to save money just for that first year. Especially if you are saving up for family planning things in the next year. Now might be the time to just get whatever discounts you can to save as much as you can. And this is what I was talking about a minute ago. Are your expenses in alignment with your own priorities and values? So once you look at this much money went to each of these categories last month, you can check like, okay, rent got the most amount of my money, and then therapy got the next highest amount of money, and then, my student loans or like whatever it is, just like check that the order in which things are getting your money is actually what's most important to you. And some numbers we don't have much control over, right? Like when the student loans come back at the end of January, they're going to cost what they're going to cost. But the ones that you might have control over, you can double check if how much you're spending makes sense relative to the other expenses in your life. It's all about prioritizing. It's all about being intentional. So once you know what your expenses have been, then you can make a plan for what you want your expenses to be, at least for the ones we can control. So you basically make a list of like, this is my income. These are the bills. The expenses need to add up to what the income is and no higher. And that'll let you see also how much room you have for saving per month. Once you have that plan, you got to actually try to stick to it. And so I recommend you track your income and expenses continuously. I know a lot of folks kind of shy away from that. It feels overwhelming. It feels exhausting. It's just hard to start the habit. But let me tell you, the more you can make watching your money a habit, the more control you can feel over money as a tool. I really help my clients not feel like money's controlling them, but instead feel like they're in control of their money, because money is just a tool that we use to survive and then to try to get what we want out of life. And if you're not facing what's going on, then you might not actually be intentional or have control over what you can do. Like I said, figure out what budgeting tool works for you. It might be spreadsheet, it might be YNAB, it might be the Mint app or whatever. Just whatever's going to make sense for your brain is what you should use. And then always remember, you can modify your budget as often as you want. It is a living document. You don't have to make one budget and then stick to it for the next year. You can readjust every 3 months or every month if you want. I find it helpful for some clients who have like a consistent paycheck every 2 weeks to make a plan for the next 3 months, because the income's pretty consistent. They can kind of think 3 months ahead. But if we think about making a budget just for the fall and then just for the winter and then just for the spring, we can kind of focus on like, okay, maybe fall we're buying back to school things, or we're buying winter clothes as it starts to get cold. Maybe in the winter we're buying holiday presents. Maybe in the spring we're buying summer clothes or starting to buy some vacations or something, like if we can focus on it seasonally, then we can focus on the things that are important to that season. For my folks who have variable income every month, and it's not a consistent paycheck, but maybe you're self-employed or a freelancer, it might be helpful to have a different budget every month. Like, okay, next month, I know I've got $4,000 coming in because I've got this contract signed and the payment schedule due. So maybe for that 4,000, this much can go to rent, this much can go to bills, and this much can go to savings because I've got that extra income. Maybe the month after that, I've only got 2,500 coming in. So I'm going to make sure that the bills get covered and maybe only a little bit goes to savings or none. But if you can plan for each month of what money-wise is coming into you, then you can know what you're going to do with that money as it comes in. Also, for my folks with variable incomes, having a one monthly budget to start and then changing it each month can also help you figure out how much money you want to bring in, right? Like for me, I'm self-employed and I work with a number of individual clients as well as teaching budgeting courses. So if I look ahead 2 months from now and I'm like, ooh, I would really love to have some money to buy a new couch 2 months from now, or I would really love some money to put extra into savings for those adoption expenses in a year. Then I can say, maybe I need to bring on 3 more clients, or maybe I need to run another budgeting course. So that way I can bring more income in to meet those goals for that month. Big thing here, find some kind of accountability system to actually keep facing your income and expenses and watching your budget. So it could be just you and your partner agree that on Friday nights, we make dinner together and look at the budget while dinner's in the oven. It could be after therapy on Thursdays, I check my budget. Whatever system works for you, just give it a try. You can also try to talk to a friend about it. I know money is like such a taboo subject and it's hard to talk about, but maybe you and your best friend would both benefit from talking about money more and talking about the financial goals that you have and how hard it is to look at your budget every month or every week. And if you're really struggling and you really can't face it, like consider hiring a professional, honestly, even if it's just for a couple months. I don't want to see y'all just keep avoiding money forever or just hoping for the best and being scared about it. I would rather see you use whatever is available to you to use money as a tool to get what you want and to have the families that you want to have. I'm going to talk a little bit about types of accounts. People are always asking me, like, should I be investing, or when should I be investing, or what type of account should I be using to save for my goals? Anytime you have a goal of using money that, using money that you're saving up within the next 2 years. So if you are, have a goal of having a kid in the next 2 years and you're saving up some money for that, keep that money in a savings account. That short a time frame, I don't feel comfortable investing it in the stock market because we don't know what's going to happen in the stock market in the next 2 years. And I don't want the stock market to crash the day that you need the money. So keep that in a savings account. Make sure the savings account is FDIC insured. All the major banks are FDIC insured. Basically, it just means that if the bank goes under, the federal government will bail them out, which is good news for your savings living in that account. If your goal is 3 or more years away, that's where we can consider investing. So a just general investment account is called a brokerage account or a taxable account. It's called a taxable account because there's no tax benefits. You pay income tax on your money, then you invest the money. Then when you pull the money back out, you pay taxes on however much the money grew while it was invested. When you are investing, you would open a brokerage account at some investment platform. You would choose a diversified investment portfolio. And by that, I mean, don't just put all of your eggs in one basket. Don't just put all of your money in like Apple stock or something, like make sure it's in like multiple things. So things like mutual funds and ETFs or exchange traded funds are investment products that you can buy within your brokerage account that are tiny slices of many things in one place, so that if Apple stock takes a hit tomorrow, it's only a tiny slice of your overall investment. It's not going to bring your whole savings worth, down. And then also choose the level of risk in your investments according to the time frame. The more time we have, the more risk we can take on for more potential reward. Because if something happens in the stock market next year and you still got 5 years until your goal, then you have a couple years for it to rebuild from there. We saw this happen with the beginning of COVID. People who were like trying to pull money out of their investment accounts, like in March or April of 2020, the value of the account was down because the whole stock market was down. When they pulled that money out, now that cash is only worth the amount of money that they pulled out. For the folks who left their money in, it bounced back up. So they just had to wait and let the account value go back up as the economy recovered. And, we can talk about how messed up it is that this country handled the pandemic the way it did. But from a purely financial perspective, if folks needed that money in April of 2020, they were kind of screwed that the value was just lower because of what was happening in the world. But for the folks who could wait another couple of years for the money to bounce back up, it did. And now they have that money available again. Does that make sense? Then I want to talk a little bit about what to do once you have your kid from a financial perspective. And then I can answer any other questions y'all have. So, important documents to have when you have a child: adoption decree, if that's relevant. And again, even if one partner gave birth to the baby, then the other partner might still need to adopt. If you don't have a genetic link, please make sure you do the step parent adoption or second parent adoption or whatever you need to do in order to make sure that your child is legally yours, and make sure that that paperwork is available on hand. Obviously, a birth certificate, marriage certificate, and then estate plan is really important to get if you don't have one. People are always like, oh, but I don't have an estate. Estate plan is just the legal term for it, but it is a will and it is also guardianship. Oh, I think that's my next slide actually. So an estate plan has your will, so who gets your stuff. It will list who is your power of attorney. So that's a person who can make legal decisions for you if you are unable to make them for yourself. Healthcare proxy, a person who can make medical decisions for you if you're unable to make them for yourself. Advanced healthcare directive of what do you want for yourself medically if you are unable to make decisions for yourself. And then very important once you have kids is guardianship. Who's going to take care of your kids if you're not around or you're not able to care for them? Having that listed is so crucial before there's any kind of crisis, just please be prepared. You get an estate plan by hiring an estate planning attorney. And I know that the Journer Law Group has offered presentations to Philadelphia Family Pride in the past. And there is actually a recording on the Philadelphia Family Pride Facebook page of Ben Journer talking more about estate planning in detail. So if you want to know more, you can check that out. And you can look at Journer Law Group or other attorneys in Pennsylvania. If you live in Pennsylvania, just choose the state that you live within to work with an estate planning attorney and get that written up. Costs for an estate plan can vary. I've seen it range from $300 to $3,000. Kind of depends on how complex your situation is. If there's 3 parents, that's more complex than 2 parents. It's more complex than 1 parent. But just get something written up by an attorney so that you have all of that in place in case of a crisis. I also want to talk about life insurance. This is really important when anybody else is counting on your ability to work over the long term. Some terms to know about life insurance. The simplest form of life insurance and what is useful for most everyday Americans is term life insurance. So the term is the amount of time you are covered. It's usually 20 or 30 years. And so term life insurance just says if I were to pass away during that 20-year term that I selected, then I would have this amount of money paid out to my beneficiary. And so when I buy term life insurance, I get to choose, I want a 20-year policy for $500,000. So if I die anytime in that 20 years, $500,000 gets paid out to my partner and my brother or whatever I've specified. Permanent life insurance is permanent. It's lifelong coverage. So it will pay out because we will all die someday. But but that makes it much more expensive because the insurance company still wants to profit, right? So the cost of permanent life insurance is usually like 12 times as much as the cost of term life insurance. And that's why it's often not affordable for us everyday Americans. But I did want you to know it exists. The premium is what you pay to buy the policy, usually pay annually or monthly. The benefit is the amount of money that is paid out to your beneficiary if you do pass away. And your beneficiary is the person, or beneficiaries are the people who get the money. So you would need this life insurance if you have kids that are counting on your income or your labor to raise them and take care of them. There would need to be money to either replace your income or to hire a nanny or other childcare support. Also, if you have debt that would stick around after you passed away, I sometimes see this with private student loans, unfortunately, then you might also need life insurance that would pay off that debt if you are no longer around to pay it. Federal student loans go away if you pass away, so federal student loans, no worries. But things like credit card debt and private student loans or personal loans, you might want to read the fine print and see what happens, and if there would need to be some money left behind to pay that off so that your spouse or somebody else is not stuck with it. Also, we don't necessarily know if there's going to be end-of-life hospital bills. There might be funeral expenses, but if whoever you leave behind would need some money to get through that tragedy, then having some life insurance pay out to them immediately would help them get through the financial aspect of that tragedy. To figure out how much life insurance you need, it might help to work with a financial planner to get specific, but think about, if it's term life insurance, how long do you need the coverage for? If you are just having your baby this year, then maybe you want a 20-year policy that if you die anytime during the first 20 years of their life, there's money paid out to them. Maybe after they're 20, they'll be okay to find a job themselves. Maybe not. Maybe you want a 30-year policy. If you took out a mortgage with a spouse this year, or a partner or a friend, and that's a 30-year mortgage, and your person would have a hard time paying that mortgage if you weren't also there, maybe you want a 30-year term life insurance policy that would pay off the mortgage if you are no longer around to help pay for it. Think about any expenses that your dependents might need to be covered right away, like therapy for spouse and kids, bills that might need to get covered, a couple months worth of expenses to get time off work, stuff like that. But then also, what are they relying on you for in the long term? Are they relying on you to help pay for your kid to go to college? Are they relying on you to help pay off this mortgage? Like whatever it is. And then you can get quotes and look at how much will a premium cost if I want $500,000 for a 20-year policy, or how much will it cost if I want $2 million for a 30-year policy. Places like policygenius.com can get you quotes. And then you can kind of compare what seems affordable in your monthly budget. Also, if you work at a salaried job at a for-profit company, they often offer life insurance as one of your benefits. I usually see them offer 1 or 2 years of salary. So if you pass away while you're working there, they will give 1 or 2 years of your salary to your beneficiary. But that might not be enough, especially if you're trying to get a kid through 20 years or pay off a whole mortgage, you might need more life insurance than just that. So sometimes you can pay in through your paycheck to get more life insurance through your employer. And then sometimes you need to buy a private policy through someplace like Policy Genius or an insurance broker. Any questions about life insurance? I know it's like a lot of information. Next, I'm going to talk about disability insurance. I see a lot of folks not understand this, and so I want to make sure that you know that it exists. This is a private insurance policy that if you become unable to work due to a covered illness or disability, the policy would send you regular payments to help you still pay your bills and live your life. There's usually a short-term disability policy, which is usually 3 months, and then a long-term disability policy, which is longer than 3 months. And this is different from Social Security disability benefits, which is a government program. So unfortunately, the government makes it very challenging for disabled people to get their payments, and has a lot of restrictions on what else can be going on for a person financially in order to get those payments. Other So this private disability insurance that you can just buy yourself or get through a job is more likely to actually pay out and has less restrictions about what the rest of your financial situation can look like. It's also, more likely to pay out and more quickly. I see folks have to fight Social Security for years to get their actual disability benefits, whereas private insurance companies at least have more of a process for how this works and less restrictions. So you would need disability insurance if you would have no other source of income or paying your bills, if you weren't able to bring in money yourself. And then definitely if anyone else is relying on your income, like your family is. How much disability insurance do you need? Look at your typical expenses. So look at the budget and look at how much your family or household is relying on you to contribute, and then compare how much the premium costs to how much coverage you can get. I will tell you, disability insurance is much more expensive than life insurance because statistically speaking, we're all more likely to become disabled than we are to die young. So it's going to be more of a challenge to pay for depending on your situation. So again, if you work for like a salaried job at like a for-profit company, they might offer you disability insurance. And I usually see those policies will pay out 60% of your usual base salary. So not 100% of your usual salary, just 60%, because again, this country doesn't care about disabled people, but look at your monthly budget and see like, would that actually be enough for me to get through my expenses? Or should I have some more emergency savings just in case I'm unable to work for a couple months? Then you can buy disability insurance privately. And again, you can get quotes from someplace like Policy Genius or an insurance broker. Please note I am saying insurance broker, not insurance agent. I would rather you go to a broker who can get insurance quotes from multiple insurance companies than a captive agent who's just working for one specific company and trying to get you to buy from that specific company. So I want you to get the best deal you can get. Something else I want to point out about life and disability insurance is that they are both weirdly gendered. So you must apply as a man or as a woman, well, as a male or as a female. It is bullshit messed up, but life insurance is typically cheaper for women because we live longer. Disability insurance is usually more expensive for women because we can get pregnant and are at higher risk of disability. I'm going to play the game when I apply for both next year. I'm going to try to apply for life insurance at one company as a woman and apply for disability insurance at a different company as a man and see what happens, because they don't know that I exist. They don't know what's going on with me. And honestly, I don't really want insurance companies to be like making quoted premiums specific to trans people, because like statistics are not in our favor there. So we'll see what happens, but each insurance company has their own policy for how they handle trans folks. So you might just need to work with a professional to help you figure out what's going to work for you. Any questions about disability insurance or life insurance before I move on to investment things? Cool. Is this helpful? Is this like new information for people? Great. Okay. People often ask me about saving for their kids' future, like to be able to give kids money for college or other things in the future. So here's the three main options that I see, and it'll just depend on what you are looking for specifically. Oh, thanks, Galia. Yeah, that's like literally my whole goal is to like explain things to queer and trans people that like we should have been given this education in high school, but we weren't. 529 plans get talked about a lot. They are investment accounts that are specific to be used for education expenses. And that's a little broader than you might think. So obviously like colleges and universities count, but also trade school accounts, private high school accounts, community college accounts. So a 529 plan is supposed to be used for education, but education is a little bit broad. There's also some international colleges that count, or like study abroad programs. So that can be used that way. Each state in the US has their own 529 plan. You do not have to live in a state or go to school in a state in order to use their 529 plan. And I actually believe all 50 states' 529 plans have the same list of schools that the money can be used for. So that doesn't need to be a deciding factor. What you want to check is whether you get any tax benefits for using the one for the state you live in. So I believe in Pennsylvania, you can save a little money on Pennsylvania income tax, not federal income tax, just Pennsylvania income tax, if you're putting money into the Pennsylvania 529 plan. But I've also seen that like Utah's 529 plan is apparently like the easiest to use website. So just look at what's out there and compare. can work with a professional to figure it out, or you can make a choice on your own. For a 529 plan, you have to name one singular beneficiary, so one person that the money is to be used for their education, but you can transfer a 529 plan as much as you want, and you can transfer it to siblings, parents, children, and first cousins. So there is some flexibility there about, maybe you open a 529 plan for your oldest kid, they use what they can, then it gets transferred to the younger sibling for the rest of the money. It's an option. You could also, use the 529 plan, save it up, give it to the kid gets a bunch of scholarships, doesn't have to use all that money. They can hold on to that investment account and then use that money for their kids, the next generation. For the 529 plan, because it is specific to education and because there are sometimes income tax benefits, there is a penalty if you use the money for something that is not education related. So you can do it. You can pull the money out of the account and use it for other things, but you're going to have to pay a 10% penalty on however much you pulled out and used for not education, because the government is like, you're not using this right. Another option is a Roth IRA. IRA stands for Individual Retirement Account. So this is a retirement savings account. The way a Roth IRA works is you put money into the Roth IRA, like this year, you don't get any tax benefits this year. You paid all your income tax. The money's just going in there. That money grows and grows. Once you're in retirement, you pull the money out, and that's when you pay income tax on the money that you have not already. That's when you don't have to pay income tax because you already did. Just messed it up. So Roth IRA is getting income tax over with now, and then not having to pay income tax in retirement. But because of that, there's actually some flexibility there. So if you have a Roth IRA open for at least 5 years, then you're allowed to withdraw however much money you put into it over the last 5 years without any penalties. The amount that the investment has grown in that time, that one you can't take out without taxes and penalties, but you could take out the amount that you've contributed. So one strategy that I've seen that I've recommended a couple of clients use is putting as much money as you can into a Roth IRA per year. Right now, the limit is $6,000 per year. Doing that for the next 18 years for your kid, then pulling out some of the money to help the kid go to college, but leaving that investment growth in there for your own retirement still. So you're kind of using the account for two purposes at once. And then I already talked about a brokerage account, which is just a taxable regular investment account. You don't get any tax advantages, but you also don't have any restrictions or penalties on what you can use the money for. So that's the most flexible option. And that is all that I wanted to say today. So I've got a few more minutes, 11 more minutes to answer any questions you want. And then I am also going to be in a Zoom room booth for half an hour after that. So come talk to me. And I also am starting the next round of my financial coaching program. It's a group program, starts in December. It's designed to teach you everything you should have been taught in high school but weren't. And in a setting where we talk about how we all have baggage about money and how capitalism is oppressing us and how whatever we were taught about money as kids is affecting our ability to use money now, talk about how we want to teach our own kids about money. So if that type of program sounds interesting at all to you, I'm happy to do a free consultation with you and make sure that it is the right fit for you. Feel free to schedule. Oh, that's not. Let me send it to the whole group. Feel free to schedule a consultation with me if you want. Feel free to hang around and ask questions now. Feel free to ask me questions for the next half hour after this in my Zoom room. And thank you for being here.